Evil does not always appear as something obvious. It rarely announces itself with aggression or open hostility. More often, it hides behind charm, politeness, and calculated behavior. Toxic and evil people do not show their full nature immediately. They reveal it slowly, through patterns. If you ignore these patterns, you give them time to damage your peace, your confidence, and your life. The Stoics believed that awareness is protection. When you see clearly, you avoid unnecessary suffering. Here are 10 signs of a toxic and evil person you must never ignore. The Stoics trained themselves to observe without illusion. They did not rush to judge, but they also did not ignore what was consistently revealed, because they understood something most people overlook. Character is not hidden forever. It leaks through behavior. Not in one dramatic moment, but in repeated small actions that, when observed carefully, form a clear pattern. Most people ignore these patterns because they want to believe in the version of a person they first encountered. They remember the charm, the politeness, the initial connection. They assume that any negative behavior is temporary, explainable, or harmless. But the Stoics would warn against this kind of thinking. They would say, do not judge based on isolated moments, judge based on consistency, because consistency reveals truth, and truth, once seen, must be accepted. Awareness does not make you cold. It makes you precise. It allows you to engage with others without losing yourself in them. It prevents you from investing energy where it will be misused. And most importantly, it protects your inner peace, the one thing the Stoics valued above all external conditions. 1. They lack genuine empathy. When others suffer, they feel nothing, or worse, they feel entertained. They dismiss pain, mock struggles, or act indifferent when compassion is required. A person without empathy has no internal barrier against harming others. Empathy is one of the fundamental limits that prevents harm. It creates a natural resistance to causing pain because you can feel, even partially, what another person experiences. When this ability is absent, that resistance disappears. The Stoics recognize that while emotions must be controlled, awareness of others must not be lost. A person who cannot recognize or respond to suffering is not simply detached. They are disconnected from a critical part of human understanding. Imagine someone sharing a difficult experience, loss, failure, emotional pain. A healthy individual may not react dramatically, but they will acknowledge it. They will show understanding, even if briefly. But the toxic individual responds differently. They minimize the experience. They redirect the conversation, or they respond with subtle amusement, as if the situation is insignificant or even entertaining. This reaction is not always obvious. It may appear as indifference rather than cruelty. But indifference in the presence of suffering reveals a deeper issue. It shows that the person does not register the impact of their actions on others. The Stoics would advise observing this carefully, not reacting emotionally, but noting the pattern. Because a person without empathy does not require a reason to harm, they only require opportunity. To apply this, watch how someone responds when others are vulnerable, not just toward you, but toward anyone. This reveals more than how they treat you directly. It shows how they understand people in general, and if empathy is consistently absent, distance becomes necessary, not out of fear, but out of clarity. 2. They manipulate your emotions. They twist situations until you question yourself. They make you feel guilty for things that are not your fault. Conversations with them often leave you confused, drained, or apologizing unnecessarily. This is not misunderstanding, it is control. The Stoics placed great importance on clarity of thought. They believed that confusion is often a signal not of complexity, but of distortion. When someone consistently leaves you uncertain about what actually happened, about what was said, or about how you should feel, there is usually a pattern beneath it. Manipulation operates through this distortion. It alters perception. It shifts responsibility. It creates doubt where clarity should exist. Imagine a situation where you express a concern. Instead of addressing the concern directly, the other person redirects the conversation. They question your reaction. They imply that you are overreacting. They introduce unrelated details that shift the focus. Over time, the original issue becomes unclear, and you are left trying to explain yourself rather than addressing the problem. This is not accidental. It is structured. The Stoics would advise anchoring yourself in facts. What was said, what was done, what was the outcome. Strip away interpretation. Focus on what is observable. This reduces the effect of manipulation because it removes the space where distortion operates. To apply this, after any confusing interaction, review it independently. Write it down if necessary. Separate what actually happened from how it was presented. Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to see through emotional manipulation, and once you see it clearly, its power begins to fade. 3. They lie without hesitation. Truth is flexible to them. They change their stories depending on the situation and speak with confidence even when they are dishonest. Over time, you realize that consistency is missing from everything they say. The Stoics valued truth not only as a moral principle, but as a practical necessity. Without truth, trust cannot exist, and without trust, no stable relationship can be built. A person who lies consistently does not operate within a stable framework. Their words shift based on advantage, not accuracy. Imagine noticing small inconsistencies in someone's statements. At first, they may seem insignificant. A detail changes, a timeline shifts, an explanation evolves. But over time, these inconsistencies accumulate. They form a pattern. And that pattern reveals that truth is not a priority, it is a tool. The Stoics would advise focusing on consistency rather than persuasion. A dishonest person may speak convincingly. They may present their version with confidence. But confidence does not equal truth. Consistency does. To apply this, observe alignment over time. Do their statements match their actions? Do their explanations remain stable across different situations? If not, the pattern is clear, and once clarity is established, trust must be adjusted accordingly. 4. They envy your growth. Instead of being inspired by your progress, they feel threatened by it. Your success creates discomfort in them. They may respond with sarcasm, subtle criticism, or emotional distance. Growth reveals character not only your own, but the character of those around you. The Stoics understood that progress changes relationships. It alters dynamics. It introduces contrast. And not everyone responds to this contrast positively. Imagine improving your discipline, your mindset, your direction. A healthy individual may feel encouraged. They may even be motivated to improve themselves. But the envious individual reacts differently. Your progress becomes a comparison point, and that comparison creates discomfort. This discomfort appears in subtle ways. Support becomes less enthusiastic. Comments become slightly critical. Distance begins to form. The Stoics would advise observing reaction, not words. Because envy rarely expresses itself directly, it appears through behavior, and behavior, over time, reveals intention. To apply this, notice how people respond to your improvement. Not just once, but consistently. If support is replaced by subtle resistance, adjust your expectations. Not everyone can grow with you. Some will only reveal themselves as you move forward. 5. They exploit your kindness. They take your help, your time, and your energy without appreciation. Once they receive what they want, they either disappear or act as if your support was never significant. To them, kindness is something to use, not respect. The Stoics believed that kindness must be guided by reason. Without that guidance, it becomes vulnerable to misuse. The exploiter does not see your kindness as a reflection of your character. They see it as a resource, something to access, something to benefit from. something to consume without consideration for its source. At first, the interaction may seem normal. You help, they receive. There is no immediate conflict, but over time, a pattern emerges. The interaction is one-sided. You give, they take. There is no acknowledgement, no reciprocity, no awareness of the effort involved. And when your help is no longer available, their presence fades. Imagine consistently supporting someone, offering time, advice, or resources. Then, when you pause or withdraw, their engagement disappears. The connection was not built on mutual respect. It was built on access. The Stoics would advise recognizing this distinction early, because continuing to give in this dynamic does not strengthen the relationship, it reinforces exploitation. To apply this, observe patterns of reciprocity, not in equal exchange, but in acknowledgement and respect. If your effort is consistently consumed without recognition, adjust your involvement. Kindness should elevate, not drain, and when it begins to drain, it must be redirected. 6. They create unnecessary drama. Conflict follows them everywhere. There is always a problem, an argument, or a story. They thrive in chaos because it gives them attention and control. The Stoics valued peace not as passivity, but as stability. They understood that unnecessary conflict disrupts clarity, drains energy, and creates distraction. The individual who constantly generates drama introduces instability into every environment they enter. At first, the situations may appear unrelated. Different people, different contexts, different issues. But over time, a pattern becomes visible. The common element is not the situation, it is the person. Imagine someone who always has a conflict to discuss. There is always a disagreement, a misunderstanding, a problem that requires attention. Each story draws you in. Each situation demands a reaction. And over time, your focus shifts from your own priorities to managing their chaos. The Stoics would advise stepping back and examining the pattern. Is the conflict unavoidable, or is it consistently created? If it follows the person rather than the circumstance, the answer becomes clear. To apply this, limit your involvement in unnecessary conflict. Do not engage in every situation presented. Observe rather than react. Over time, this reduces your exposure to chaos and preserves your mental clarity. 7. They avoid accountability. Nothing is ever their fault. They blame others, circumstances, or misunderstandings. This refusal to take responsibility prevents growth and allows harmful behavior to continue. Accountability is the foundation of improvement. Without it, behavior remains unchanged. The Stoics believed that responsibility is not a burden, it is a tool. It allows you to identify what can be adjusted. But the toxic individual rejects this tool. They shift responsibility outward. They create explanations that remove their role from the outcome. Imagine addressing a clear issue with someone. Instead of acknowledging their part, they redirect. They explain why it happened, but not how they contributed. They justify rather than correct. Over time, this pattern becomes predictable, and predictability reveals permanence. The Stoics would advise recognizing that without accountability, there is no intention to change. And without intention, no amount of external input will create improvement. To apply this, observe how someone responds to mistakes. Not what they say initially, but what they do afterward. Do they adjust their behavior, or do they repeat the pattern? If responsibility is consistently avoided, distance becomes necessary, because without accountability, the same problems will continue to appear. 8. They try to control your decisions. They subtly influence your choices, relationships, and direction. What appears as advice often carries pressure. Their goal is not to guide you, it is to shape you according to their needs. Control rarely appears as direct force. It appears as suggestion, as guidance, as concern. It is presented in a way that feels helpful, but carries an underlying direction. The Stoics valued independence of thought. They believed that each individual must govern their own decisions. When someone attempts to influence those decisions consistently, it disrupts that independence. Imagine receiving advice that feels less like an option and more like an expectation. The tone suggests that deviation is incorrect. The suggestion becomes pressure. Over time, your decisions begin to align with their preferences rather than your own reasoning. The Stoics would advise examining intention. Is the guidance offered to support your growth or to align you with their interests? This distinction is critical. To apply this, pause before accepting direction. Evaluate it independently. Ask whether it aligns with your values and goals. If it does, consider it. If it does not, decline it. Maintaining control over your decisions preserves your direction. 9. They betray trust easily. If they share others' secrets with you, they will share yours with someone else. Loyalty is not selective. Once trust is broken, it reveals a pattern, not a mistake. Trust is built on consistency. It is maintained through discretion. The Stoics understood that loyalty is not situational, it is structural. A person who reveals private information about others demonstrates a pattern. It may not involve you immediately, but it will eventually. Imagine someone sharing confidential details about another person. They present it casually, as conversation, but the act itself reveals something deeper. It shows that boundaries are not respected. And if boundaries are not respected in one instance, they are unlikely to be respected in another. The Stoics would advise learning from observation rather than experience. You do not need to be the subject of betrayal to recognize it. When you see it, the pattern is already clear. To apply this, limit the level of trust you extend to those who demonstrate this behavior. Share only what is necessary. Protect what is important. Trust should be built on evidence, not assumption. 10. Your intuition warns you. Even when everything seems normal on the surface, something feels wrong. That quiet discomfort is often your mind recognizing patterns your eyes have not fully processed yet. Ignoring it can be costly. The Stoics valued reason, but they did not ignore instinct. They understood that intuition is often the result of accumulated observation. Subtle signals, tone, behavior, inconsistency are processed below conscious awareness, and the result is a feeling, unease, discomfort, uncertainty. Most people ignore this feeling because they cannot immediately explain it. They seek logical confirmation before acting. But the Stoics would advise respecting the signal while seeking clarity. Imagine interacting with someone who appears polite, yet something feels off. There is no clear evidence, but the feeling persists. Over time, small details begin to align. The intuition was not random, it was early recognition. To apply this, do not dismiss consistent discomfort. Observe it. Investigate it. Allow time to reveal whether the pattern is real, and if it is, act accordingly. Recognizing these signs is not about becoming fearful or suspicious of everyone. It is about protecting your peace with awareness and wisdom. Not everyone deserves access to your life, your energy, or your trust. The Stoics believed that clarity is protection. When you see people as they are not as you hope them to be, you reduce unnecessary suffering. You make decisions based on reality, not assumption. And in doing so, you create an environment where your energy is preserved and your direction remains stable. Distance is sometimes the strongest response to a toxic and dangerous character. Not confrontation, not explanation, distance. Because when you remove access, you remove influence. And when you remove influence, you regain control. Now write this in the comments. I see clearly, and I protect my peace.